These stars didn't just rule the box office. They reigned supreme after hours, hosting parties so extravagantly, their guest lists and stories have become legend. Some of your favorite silver screen icons were also nightlife royalty, and the number of names on this list will truly shock you. Prepare to journey beyond the studio lights into a world of luxury, mischief, and unforgettable moments that defined an era you thought you knew. Marilyn Monroe. When you think of Hollywood's golden parties, the image of Marilyn Monroe, radiant in a shimmering dress, laughter in her eyes, inevitably comes to mind. But Marilyn's parties were not just about glamour. They were about intimacy, joy, and the longing for connection beneath the surface. The legend of her gatherings in Los Angeles is a fascinating glimpse into both the myth and the reality of Monroe. Unlike the lavish spectacles some of her peers orchestrated, Monroe preferred smaller, carefully curated gatherings. Her apartment in Hollywood, and later her Brentwood home, became sanctuaries where the industry's brightest came to let their guard down. Monroe invited not only movie stars, but also writers, musicians, and artists. People who inspired her, or whose company brought her peace. She famously enjoyed impromptu piano sing-alongs, candlelit conversations, and would sometimes cook homemade meals, surprising guests with her warmth and hospitality. A Monroe party wasn't about excess. It was about connection. Guests would arrive expecting to find the bombshell of the screen, but instead found a Marilyn who craved authenticity. Stories abound of Monroe curled up on her couch, trading industry gossip with the likes of Marlon Brando, or discussing poetry with Truman Capote. She was magnetic, drawing people in with her vulnerability and sense of fun. Of course, there was always an edge of unpredictability. Marilyn's moods could shift, and parties sometimes turned reflective, almost melancholy. But that was the charm. Her gatherings were real, emotional, and unforgettable. Even the most seasoned Hollywood veterans would later confess that a night at Monroe's was something special. A night when stars, for a little while, could be themselves. Clark Gable. If Marilyn Monroe was the queen of intimate get-togethers, Clark Gable was the king of grand Hollywood parties. Gable's reputation as a leading man extended beyond the silver screen. His hospitality was legendary, and his events were a staple of the social calendar for Hollywood's elite. Gable's parties often took place at his Encino Ranch or his stately homes in the Hollywood Hills. They were meticulously planned, yet always seemed effortlessly casual, a testament to Gable's natural charisma and ability to make every guest feel like royalty. The guest list was a who's who of Hollywood: directors, producers, fellow actors, and even the occasional studio head. Everyone wanted an invitation to a Gable gathering. What set Gable's parties apart was their atmosphere. He loved the outdoors, so barbecues and garden parties were frequent, complete with grilled steaks and freshly mixed cocktails. He had a knack for blending elegance with relaxation. Guests could just as easily find themselves in a formal dining room as around a bonfire under the stars. The activities were as memorable as the food and company. Gable would organize impromptu games, sometimes poker, sometimes horseshoes, or badminton. He had a quick wit and a deep laugh, making everyone feel at ease. While the parties were certainly glamorous, they were never stuffy. Even the biggest egos seemed to shrink a little in Gable's presence. It wasn't uncommon for these gatherings to last until sunrise, with stories shared over whiskey and old jazz records. For many in Hollywood, a night at Clark Gable's meant forging connections, letting loose, and savoring the rare magic of a man whose charm off-screen was every bit as potent as on it. Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor didn't just throw parties. She staged unforgettable spectacles that defined Hollywood excess. From her teenage years as a rising star to her reign as a global icon, Taylor's celebrations were the stuff of legend, blending opulence, excitement, and a touch of the outrageous. Taylor's homes, whether in Bel Air, Beverly Hills, or London, were stages for some of the most talked-about gatherings in the industry. birthdays, weddings, or simply the desire to celebrate life. Any excuse was enough for Taylor to throw a bash. Her guest lists were unmatched. From Frank Sinatra to Andy Warhol, Michael Jackson to royalty, her parties attracted a dazzling spectrum of guests. Champagne flowed freely, and no expense was spared. Taylor famously loved to surprise her guests with elaborate themes. One party featured live elephants and jugglers, while another saw her transform her mansion into an Arabian Nights fantasy. Her love for fine jewelry and glamour spilled over into every detail. Centerpieces sparkled with diamonds, and the decor always pushed the limits of imagination. But Taylor's parties were more than just a show. She made everyone, from Hollywood royalty to the shyest newcomer, feel welcome and included. Her warmth was as legendary as her beauty. She danced, laughed, and sometimes even performed impromptu numbers for her friends. There were moments of genuine connection, whether she was sharing a joke with Richard Burton or comforting a friend going through hard times. Perhaps most importantly, Taylor's parties reflected her passion for living life to the fullest. For her, a party wasn't just a night out. It was a chance to celebrate love, friendship, and the preciousness of every moment. For those lucky enough to attend, an invitation to an Elizabeth Taylor party was a golden ticket to a night they'd never forget. Frank Sinatra. When it comes to legendary parties, few can match the sheer electricity and allure of a Frank Sinatra bash. Whether it was his Palm Springs getaway, his Los Angeles hideaway, or an upscale Las Vegas suite, Old Blue Eyes set the gold standard for entertainment, style, and pure, unadulterated fun. Sinatra's parties were synonymous with the high life. Think flowing martinis, sharp suits, laughter that echoed into the morning, and the best music you could possibly hope for. The Rat Pack, Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, were the unofficial hosts, creating a heady atmosphere of camaraderie, wit, and irresistible mischief. If you were invited to a Sinatra party, you knew you were in for something special. The guest list was a blend of Hollywood royalty, music legends, politicians, and a few hand-picked friends from Sinatra's old haunts in Hoboken and New York. Music was at the heart of these gatherings. Sinatra would often commandeer the piano, crooning classics, or coaxing his guests to perform impromptu duets. The stories became legendary. Secret jam sessions with Elvis, moonlit dances with Marilyn Monroe, and poker games that stretched until sunrise. But Sinatra's parties weren't just about spectacle. They were about belonging. He had a way of making every guest feel like a VIP, whether you were a senator or a studio grip. There was a magic to Sinatra's hospitality, a blend of bravado, humor, and genuine warmth. He was fiercely loyal to his friends, quick to tell a joke, and never afraid to poke fun at himself. People came for the glitz, but they stayed for the laughter and camaraderie. To attend a Sinatra party was to step into a world where the night was always young, the music never stopped, and every guest was part of the show. Joan Crawford. No one hosted a cocktail party quite like Joan Crawford. Regal, commanding, and the ultimate perfectionist, Crawford transformed entertaining into a finely tuned art form. Every detail meticulously planned, every guest impeccably attended to. Her home was her kingdom, and when she threw a party, you could be sure it would run with military precision and dazzling flair. Crawford's soirees were legendary for their sophistication. She insisted on crisp linens, gleaming silverware, and cocktails mixed to exact specifications, down to the correct shape of the ice cube. Her famed Blue Room became the epicenter of Hollywood's cocktail culture, where the city's biggest names sipped gin fizzes and traded industry secrets. But Crawford's parties weren't just exercises in etiquette. They were full of lively conversation, raucous laughter, and an undercurrent of Hollywood intrigue. She had a gift for mixing her guests. Studio heads mingled with young starlets, writers bantered with leading men, and everyone felt like they belonged. Her parties were a place to be seen, to make connections, and to feel the pulse of the movie industry at its most glamorous. Behind the perfectionism was a host who genuinely cared about her guests' comfort and enjoyment. Crawford was known to circulate among the crowd, personally refilling glasses and engaging in witty repartee. She could be sharp-tongued, but never unkind, always ensuring everyone had a good time. Some said she was as tough on her parties as she was on herself, driven by a need for approval, yet always the consummate entertainer. To be invited to one of Crawford's cocktail parties was an honor, and the memory of those evenings lingered long after the last drink was poured. Under her watchful eye, every guest experienced a taste of Hollywood's golden glamour, served with a side of perfectly chilled sophistication. Judy Garland. Judy Garland's parties were the stuff of legend, not because they were the grandest or the most extravagant, but because they were the warmest, wildest, and most musical gatherings in Hollywood. The star of The Wizard of Oz had a way of drawing people into her orbit, creating a magical, inclusive energy that kept guests talking about her after-hours gatherings for years. Garland's favorite parties took place after her shows, when the adrenaline was high and the night felt electric with possibility. Her home was a sanctuary for friends, fellow musicians, and rising talents. Guests would cluster around the piano, singing along as Garland belted out ballads or led the group in raucous sing-alongs. She loved nothing more than music and laughter, and her home was often filled with both until dawn. These gatherings weren't just about performance, they were about connection. Garland was famously empathetic, always reaching out to newcomers, struggling artists, or anyone in need of a little warmth and acceptance. She made everyone feel at home, from the biggest stars to the most anonymous musicians. The result was a sense of family, a tight-knit community that supported each other through triumphs and heartbreak alike. Yet, as with so much in Garland's life, there was a note of poignancy beneath the joy. Her parties were also escapes from the pressures of fame, a chance to be herself without judgment or expectation. She was quick with a joke, ready to break into song, and fiercely protective of her friends. In the glow of Judy's living room, surrounded by laughter and music, even the jaded felt young again. A Judy Garland party wasn't just an event. It was an experience, a reminder that even in Hollywood, magic was real, and kindness was always in fashion. Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. When Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall came together, so did two of Hollywood's sharpest wits and brightest stars. Their home became the unofficial headquarters for the Rat Pack before Sinatra took over the reins, and their parties were a celebration of effortless cool, friendship, and an irreverent sense of humor. The Bogart-Bacall residence on Hollywood's Whitley Heights was always buzzing with activity. Their gatherings weren't grand balls or over-the-top spectacles, but rather informal, laughter-filled get-togethers where the most important ingredient was good company. The guest list read like a Hollywood Hall of Fame: Sinatra, Judy Garland, Spencer Tracy, David Niven, and more. But there was never a hint of pretension. The couple's warmth and intelligence set the tone. Bacall, with her smoky voice and biting wit, kept guests on their toes, while Bogart, known to friends as Bogey, was the master of dry humor and self-deprecation. Card games, late-night philosophical debates, and impromptu performances were standard fare. Their parties often spilled onto the patio, with guests sipping scotch under the stars, swapping stories, and ribbing each other in that special way only true friends can. Bogart and Bacall believed in inclusivity and authenticity. You could be a studio mogul or a struggling writer. If you were fun, interesting, or just needed a place to belong, their door was open. Their gatherings became the soul of a certain Hollywood era, one where friendship was valued over status and laughter over luxury. In the end, a night at the Bogart-Bacall home felt like being part of an exclusive, loving family, one with a taste for good whiskey, better conversation, and the unshakable belief that in the right company, every night could be unforgettable. Fred Astaire. When you received an invitation to Fred Astaire's home, you didn't just expect good company and fine food. You expected to be swept off your feet, quite literally. Astaire's parties were a reflection of his persona, polished, playful, and filled with effortless charm. Unlike some of his contemporaries who favored the raucous or the excessive, Astaire preferred his gatherings with a touch of class and a lot of rhythm. The centerpiece of many Astaire soirees was, of course, the dance floor. His living room would be cleared of furniture to accommodate spontaneous performances, and it wasn't uncommon for Hollywood's best dancers, actors, and musicians to gather and jam until the small hours. Ginger Rogers, Sid Charisse, and Gene Kelly were regulars. Sometimes a gentle waltz, other times a full-blown tap extravaganza. Astaire delighted in showing off his new steps, but he was just as happy watching his guests shine. The music never stopped. Live bands, jazz quartets, or just Astaire at the piano kept the atmosphere electric. Drinks were poured with a generous hand, but the real intoxication was the pure joy of movement and camaraderie. Astaire would glide around the room, greeting everyone, encouraging wallflowers to join in, ensuring no one felt left out. Beyond the dancing, Astaire's parties had a welcoming intimacy. He preferred close friends and fellow artists over grand Hollywood egos. Conversation flowed as easily as the champagne, peppered with laughter and the occasional inside joke about the business. At Fred Astaire's, status melted away, replaced by a shared love for the arts and each other's company. To attend one of his legendary evenings was to experience Hollywood as a living musical, a place where, for one magical night, everyone was invited to dance. Errol Flynn. No list of Hollywood party legends is complete without the wild, uninhibited presence of Errol Flynn. If Fred Astaire brought grace, Flynn brought sheer, unbridled energy, a sense that anything could happen, and probably would. Flynn's bashes were notorious for their decadence, unpredictability, and a cast of characters worthy of a swashbuckling adventure. Flynn's home, nestled in the Hollywood Hills, or sometimes aboard his beloved yacht, Zaka, was party headquarters for thrill-seekers and fun lovers. The guest list was eclectic. Actors, artists, socialites, and sometimes complete strangers swept up in Flynn's whirlwind orbit. No one knew exactly what to expect. There might be live music, impromptu fencing matches, skinny dipping in the pool, or exotic animals making surprise appearances. Alcohol flowed freely, as did the stories. Flynn was a raconteur, spinning tales of high-seas adventures or on-set mishaps that left his audience in stitches. Yet beneath the bravado was a charismatic host who thrived on making every guest feel at home, no matter how outrageous the proceedings became. The press dubbed his affairs scandalous, but friends remembered them as liberating, a place where social conventions were cast aside, and everyone was invited to revel in the joy of the moment. Flynn's generosity was legendary. He'd go out of his way to ensure no one left hungry, bored, or without a story to tell. A night at Errol Flynn's was never just a party. It was an experience, a wild escape from the everyday. For better or worse, guests would reminisce about those nights for years, always with a mischievous grin and a glint of adventure in their eyes. Carrie Grant. Carrie Grant's reputation as the suavest man in Hollywood wasn't confined to the big screen. It extended to his legendary parties, where sophistication and spontaneity danced hand in hand. Grant's approach to entertaining was deceptively simple. Make every guest feel like they belonged to an exclusive, yet wonderfully relaxed club. His home, a masterpiece of modern elegance, was the perfect backdrop for gatherings that blended Hollywood glamour with English wit. Guests would be greeted with impeccable cocktails, often prepared by Grant himself. He took pride in mixing the perfect martini or a classic gin and tonic. The atmosphere was intimate and effortlessly stylish, reflecting Grant's own personality. Games were a hallmark of a Carrie Grant evening. Whether it was charades, parlor games, or impromptu treasure hunts, Grant loved to see his friends loosen up and laugh together. He'd often surprise guests with little gifts or silly props, breaking the ice and making even the most reserved attendees feel at home. Stories circulated about starlets, arm wrestling producers, or legendary directors tackling tongue-twister challenges, all at Grant's gentle encouragement. Conversation was key, and Grant excelled at drawing people out. He listened intently, delivered witty rejoinders, and made connections between guests who might otherwise have never met. Evenings often ended with spontaneous sing-alongs at the piano, laughter echoing through the halls as friendships were cemented. To be invited to Cary Grant's was to step into a world where charm was currency, laughter was plentiful, and the worries of Hollywood were left at the door. His parties may not have made headlines for their extravagance, but their warmth, elegance, and genuine good spirit left a lasting impression on all who attended. Bette Davis. Bette Davis didn't throw parties to impress. She threw them to engage, provoke, and inspire. Her gatherings were legendary for their wit, passion, and sometimes fiery debates. If you wanted to be coddled, you went elsewhere. If you wanted an unforgettable evening, you showed up at Bette's. Davis's Beverly Hills home was often filled with writers, directors, and actors who craved stimulating conversation and weren't afraid of a little intellectual sparring. The guest list was diverse, sometimes unpredictable, and always fascinating. Davis herself was the nucleus, a dynamo of energy, quick with a quip or a pointed question that would spark a lively discussion or a heated argument. She loved to challenge her guests, encouraging opinions, banter, and the kind of honesty that was rare in Hollywood's often polished social scene. But it wasn't all debate and drama. Davis had a wicked sense of humor and a deep appreciation for music and theater. Impromptu performances were common, and she might break into song or recite poetry to an enraptured audience. There was a sense that anything could happen. One minute, guests might be embroiled in a debate about a new film. The next, they were all singing show tunes in the living room. Davis's hospitality was legendary. She paid close attention to every detail: good food, strong drinks, and a welcoming atmosphere. Even guests who left with their egos bruised would confess that a night at Davis's was the most fun they'd had in ages. At her core, Bette Davis was about authenticity. She drew people in with her intensity, her fearlessness, and her desire for genuine connection. Her parties were a testament to her belief that Hollywood, for all its artifice, could still produce moments of true candor and camaraderie. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich's parties were a masterclass in elegance, taste, and cosmopolitan charm. Known for her cool sophistication and magnetic allure, Dietrich's gatherings drew the crème de la crème of Hollywood and European society, creating an atmosphere where the worlds of film, music, and high fashion collided in dazzling harmony. Dietrich's homes, whether in Los Angeles or Paris, served as chic salons where royalty, writers, and stars mingled over gourmet meals and rare wines. She delighted in hosting dinner parties, where the conversation sparkled almost as much as the jewels she wore. Dietrich was a consummate chef, personally overseeing her kitchen, and often cooking German or French delicacies for her guests. She believed that good food was the foundation of a memorable evening. Entertainment at a Dietrich party might mean an impromptu cabaret performance, a dramatic reading, or an intimate musical interlude. Her guest list was famously eclectic. Salvador Dalí might chat with Charlie Chaplin, while a young Yves Saint Laurent admired the table settings. Dietrich's knack for connecting people made her gatherings fertile ground for new collaborations and lifelong friendships. But for all the glamour, Dietrich's parties were never cold or intimidating. She greeted guests with warmth and genuine curiosity, ensuring that even newcomers felt at ease. Her wit was legendary, her laughter infectious, and her ability to tell a perfectly timed story unmatched. An invitation to Dietrich's was a ticket to an evening of style, sophistication, and worldliness. Her gatherings offered a glimpse into a world where art, intellect, and beauty were celebrated, and where, for a few enchanted hours, everyone could be a star. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. Few couples embodied the spirit of fun and creativity quite like Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. As the pioneering power duo behind I Love Lucy, their off-screen life was just as vibrant, fueled by their shared passion for entertainment, music, and above all, laughter. Their Chatsworth Ranch became a beacon for Hollywood's elite and up-and-comers, a place where the usual barriers of celebrity were cheerfully knocked down. A Ball Arnaz party was always high energy. The sprawling ranch offered the perfect playground for spirited games, baseball in the backyard, pool parties in the summer, and elaborate treasure hunts that had even the most serious studio execs sprinting across the lawn. Desi's Cuban heritage inspired lively dance sessions, with the man himself often leading the conga line or breaking out his congas for an impromptu rumba. Music pulsed through their parties, with famous guests like Frank Sinatra or Bing Crosby sometimes taking the mic, and Lucy herself never far from a practical joke or slapstick stunt that had everyone in stitches. Yet, behind the hijinks was a genuine warmth. Lucy and Desi had a talent for making everyone feel at home, whether you were a seasoned star or a nervous newcomer. They encouraged guests to bring their families, and their children would mix and play together, a rarity in Hollywood's adult-centric social scene. Food was always plentiful, blending American classics with spicy Cuban fare, and the drinks, especially Desi's legendary daiquiris, were served with a smile. Those who attended a Ball Arnaz party often left with their sides sore from laughter and their spirits lifted. For Lucy and Desi, entertaining wasn't about showing off. It was about sharing their joy, building lasting friendships, and creating memories that lingered long after the music stopped. In their home, everyone was part of the family, and every night was a celebration of life's simple, silly pleasures. Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo was a legend built on mystique, a star whose luminous presence on screen was matched by her elusiveness off it. But for those few granted entry into her inner circle, Garbo's parties were revelations, offering rare glimpses of her wit, intellect, and surprisingly playful nature. Garbo's soirees were the opposite of the sprawling, noisy affairs typical in Hollywood. She preferred small, intimate gatherings, dinners for 6, maybe 10 at most. Her taste was refined and understated. From the Scandinavian dishes, she sometimes prepared herself to the simple, elegant flowers that adorned her table. The guest list was always curated with care. A poet, a painter, an actor or two, perhaps a close friend visiting from Europe. What mattered to Garbo was conversation, real, searching, sometimes philosophical, often tinged with gentle humor. There was no expectation to perform or impress. Garbo delighted in quiet companionship, the sharing of ideas and stories without pretense. After dinner, guests might stroll through her garden, discuss literature by the fireplace, or even share a private viewing of foreign films. The ambiance was cozy, a welcome refuge from Hollywood's glare. Yet, these evenings were not without glamour. Garbo's presence was magnetic, her beauty almost otherworldly, and her laughter, when it came, genuine and disarming. She had a way of making her guests feel special, seen, and truly listened to. While she was famously private, Garbo's hospitality left a lasting impression on those she trusted, inspiring loyalty and affection. To have attended a Garbo gathering was to be part of a secret world, one defined by grace, intelligence, and a rare kind of intimacy. Her parties proved that even the brightest stars sometimes shine best in the company of just a chosen few. Jean Harlo. If Hollywood had a queen of shock and surprise, it was Jean Harlo. Known for her platinum locks and mischievous charm, Harlo's parties were as memorable as her screen performances. Bold, beautiful, and a little bit wild. Her famed white parties became legendary, a testament to her unique blend of glamour and playfulness. The rules for a Harlo white party were simple but strict. Guests had to wear white from head to toe. The decor was an explosion of ivory. White roses, tablecloths, candles, and even the cocktail napkins matched the theme. Champagne and gin fizz flowed freely, and the guest list was always impressive. Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, Carole Lombard, and other A-listers mingled with rising starlets, and even the occasional journalist lucky enough to score an invite. But it wasn't just about the look. It was about the energy. Harlo loved to mix things up, organizing games, dares, and impromptu performances that shattered any sense of stiffness or formality. She was the life of the party, leading sing-alongs at the piano, or jumping into the pool fully clothed, always to the cheers of her delighted guests. Her laughter was infectious, her wit razor-sharp, and her ability to turn a gathering into an all-night event the stuff of legend. Despite the glamour, Harlo's parties had a generosity of spirit. She made sure no one felt left out, introducing newcomers around and always saving a dance for the shyest guest. Stories of her kindness, sending limousines for friends who didn't have cars, or comforting a heartbroken co-star with late-night talks, abounded in Hollywood. For those lucky enough to attend, a night at Jean Harlo's wasn't just a party. It was an unforgettable adventure, a glittering escape from the ordinary, and a reminder that, sometimes, Hollywood's brightest lights also have the warmest hearts. And there you have it. 15 of the most iconic party throwers from Hollywood's golden age, each one leaving an indelible mark, not just on film history, but on the very soul of Hollywood nightlife. Which of these legendary parties would you most want to attend? Did any of these star-studded stories surprise you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed diving into the glitz, glamour, and outrageous fun of classic Hollywood, don't forget to hit like, share this with your fellow movie buffs, and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating journeys through film history. Until next time, keep the party going.